The Scholastic Book Fair. As a young man raised by the United States public school system, there may be no single phrase filled with more nostalgia than those three magical words. The mere mention of the Scholastic Book Fair conjures up memories of walking into the elementary school library, only to find it transformed overnight into a bookshop filled with every kind of bendy pencil, novelty eraser, and scented marker your little 10-year-old heart could desire. But the pièce de résistance of the Scholastic Book Fair, the Holy Grail, if you will, was none other than the Guinness Book of World Records. If you were able to successfully annoy your mom into coughing up the cash, you too could be the envy of your class as you strolled up to the checkout with that hardcover book heavy enough to flatten a small child. Behind its holographic exterior was an assortment of weird, wacky, and wild world records, enough for a kid like me to waste days flipping through giant glossy page after giant glossy page. Even now, years later, the images of those neon-tinted books take up more space in my memory than almost anything else from that period in my life. I may not be able to remember the name of my second grade teacher, but I sure as hell can remember that guy who was able to fit 500 plastic straws into his mouth. All this reminiscing got me thinking, what is it about world records that we as humans find so fascinating? All around the world, people are seemingly obsessed with them, so I decided to start digging into the history of world records. And what better place to start than with baseball?
Man, baseball's fun. Wow.
From Ruth to Ryan to Ripken, the game of baseball is defined not just by its records, but by its record holders. Breaking a record in baseball is an event that ensures a player's spot in the annals of history. Any baseball fan worth a damn could tell you who holds the record for consecutive games played or most career strikeouts. However, there is one record I stumbled across during my research that is not so well known. Although this record was set over 80 years ago, it remains controversial to this day for, among other things, sending the record holder to the hospital in a bloody, mangled mess. The year is 1939. The setting is Seals Stadium, home of the Pacific Coast League's San Francisco Seals. The sellout crowd, abuzz with anticipation, collectively falls silent as journeyman catcher Joe Sprinz jogs out to the middle of the diamond. But by the time Sprinz reaches the outfield, the crowd is no longer paying any attention to him. Each and every one of the 16,000 fans in attendance have their eyes trained on the clear blue sky, where, 800 feet above the stadium, hovers the famous Goodyear blimp. See, these people haven't just come today to watch a typical Seals baseball game. Today, Joe Sprinz will be attempting something never before seen. He will be attempting to catch a baseball dropped from 800 feet above him, setting a new world record. It's time to begin the attempt. Sprinz takes his position, his arms out in front of his body. The first ball is dropped. Too small to even see at first, it rapidly picks up speed, coming in faster and faster until it misses wide. A second ball is dropped. Sprinz adjusts his footing, settles under it, and another miss. A third ball is dropped, then a fourth. The fans are getting anxious, and Joe Sprinz is beginning to have doubts that such a catch is even possible. Joe steadies himself for one more drop, this time with his hands outstretched directly above him. The fifth ball is dropped. Joe Sprinz left the field that day with a broken nose, a fractured upper jaw, and 8 of his teeth missing. He spent the next 3 months in the hospital. The day after he got his face involuntarily rearranged, Sprinz explained to reporters what had happened through a face full of gauze. "I had the ball judged all the way," Sprinz said. "The ball hit my glove. It didn't hit my face. The jar of the ball drove the mitt back against my mouth and caused all the damage." As for the pain, Sprinz claimed he was more hurt by his failure to hold on to the ball than he was, quote, hurt by my hurts. After a lengthy recovery, Joe Sprinz returned to the Seals the following year, as good as new. But the question still remains, a question that I'm sure Joe asked himself more than a few times while regaining the ability to eat solid food. How did he get to this point in the first place? For this, we need to turn the clock back 31 years to the summer of 1908, when Washington Senators fan Preston Gibson approached his associate John Biddle with a wager. The story goes that Gibson bet Biddle $500 that Senators catcher Gabby Street would be able to catch a baseball dropped from the top of the Washington Monument, which stands at 555 feet tall. Street, never one to back down from a challenge, gladly accepted the offer, showing up on the day of the event wearing just his street clothes and a catcher's mitt. The first 14 drops were unsuccessful, but on the 15th, Street was able to corral the falling baseball, which reportedly struck his mitt with a force of 300 pounds. Preston Gibson collected his $500, and Gabby Street not only went on to catch an entire Major League Baseball game later that day, he caught Walter Johnson, the hardest throwing pitcher in the league at the time. It must have been a crazy day for Gabby Street, though considering that this was the type of mitt worn by Major League catchers during the era, you probably had to be crazy to take the job in the first place. A similar stunt was attempted 18 years later by, who else, Babe Ruth. As with everything else in his life, the Babe was determined to perform his catch bigger and better than anybody before. This determination resulted in Ruth standing in the middle of an open field on July 22, 1926, as Captain Harold McClelland dropped baseballs from an airplane 1,000 feet up. However, with the sun in his eyes and the propellers kicking up clouds of dust, Ruth was unable to catch the first 6 balls. The pilot descended to 300 feet, at which point the Bambino was able to snag one in classic Ruthian style. One final tale in the canon of world record catch attempts occurred during spring training in 1915, when the Brooklyn Dodgers were holding camp in Daytona Beach, Florida. Looking for a gimmick to promote the club, the Dodgers contacted famous stunt pilot Ruth Law to organize a promotional event. The plan was to have Law fly over the ballpark and drop the first pitch from her plane into the glove of Dodgers manager Wilbert Robinson. On the day of the stunt, Law was preparing for takeoff when she realized she had forgotten to bring a baseball. The legend follows thusly. Brooklyn outfielder Casey Stengel, wanting to play a prank on Robinson, convinced Law to drop a grapefruit in place of the ball. As Law soared 500 feet above the diamond, she dropped the fruit, which proceeded to strike the blissfully unaware Robinson in the chest, sending grapefruit juice all over the place. Robinson, now covered in a mess of red liquid, took one look at himself and screamed that he had been split open by the falling baseball. Eventually, Robinson got over the shock, Stengel got a good laugh, and the Grapefruit League got its namesake. Which brings us back to Joe Sprinz. Following his unfortunate attempt at glory, reporters estimated that the ball that temporarily turned Sprinz into a Picasso painting was traveling at a speed of 154 miles per hour, which would be like getting hit in the face with a Chevy Camaro. Others disagreed with this assessment, instead clocking the ball at just 138 miles per hour, the equivalent of a mere Toyota Camry. While there was no doubt that the baseballs were traveling very fast, as evidenced by the fact that Joe Sprinz went to bed that night with 8 fewer teeth than when he woke up, it seems no one could pin down the exact speed. In my search for the truth, I came across an article from the Hardball Times written by David Kagan, titled "The Physics of Falling Baseballs." At this point, we're going to have to pause our history lesson for a brief refresher from your high school physics class. In an environment in which there is gravity but no air, like the moon, the speed of any falling object increases at a rate of 3.6 miles per hour every second. However, since what we're interested in is the speed on Earth, things get a bit more complicated. This is primarily due to 2 factors: gravitational force, called weight, and air resistance, called drag. The key thing to know here is that weight and drag are oppositional forces, meaning that they work against each other. As an object is pulled down by its weight, it begins accelerating, moving faster and faster. As the object accelerates, the drag grows as well, counteracting this acceleration. When the object reaches the point where the drag becomes equal to the weight, The object cannot speed up anymore. This is called terminal velocity. Here we have a graph showing the speed of an object versus the distance fallen. This line here represents the trajectory of an object without the effects of drag. Using this, we can chart how far an object must travel before reaching terminal velocity. For example, the terminal velocity of a typical drop of rain is 8 miles per hour, which it reaches after falling only a few feet. A large drop of rain, like that from a hurricane, has a terminal velocity of 17 miles per hour after falling about 30 feet. As you can see, a baseball still falls at nearly the same speed after 40 feet as it would if there were no drag. The baseball will therefore have to be dropped from much higher to reach terminal velocity. Here we have upped the scale to a distance of 1,500 feet. As you can see, by the time a baseball has fallen 250 feet, the effects of drag are beginning to be noticeable. At around 1,000 feet, we can see the graph begin to flatten out as the baseball approaches terminal velocity. Using simple physics, we can determine that Gabby Street's catch from the Washington Monument was traveling 87 miles per hour, while Babe Ruth's catch was only going 75. As for Joe Sprinz, it seems that the estimates at the time of 138 and 154 miles per hour were slightly exaggerated, since the terminal velocity of a baseball is somewhere in the neighborhood of 95.5 miles per hour, about the speed of the average Yu Darvish four-seamer. With all due respect to Joe Sprinz, it would appear that his injuries were due to a combination of poor form and bad luck, rather than the supposedly uncatchable speed of a baseball falling from 800 feet. And given that your average MLB player catches balls traveling upward of 95 miles per hour on a daily basis, a catch from such a height must surely be possible, right? This question went unanswered for nearly 80 years until July 13, 2013, when baseball catcher extraordinaire Zack Hample set out to catch a ball dropped from a helicopter hovering over 1,000 feet in the air. Likely having learned from our old friend Joe Sprinz what could go wrong with such an activity, Hample clad himself in catcher's gear and protective padding for the attempt, which took place at the home park of the Lowell Spinners, the single-A affiliate of the Boston Red Sox. After many drops, Hample was finally able to snag one, setting the new unofficial world record at 1,050 feet. I say unofficial because Guinness World Records had declined to send a representative to observe the catch. As for who holds the official world record, different sources will give you different answers. Zack Hample claims he is the world record holder, while yet another website states that Guinness actually did credit Joe Sprinz with the record, although I haven't been able to find any other documentation of this claim. Official highest catch records exist for all manner of objects, ranging from footballs to marshmallows. That is, all except for baseball. One thing is for certain, though. No matter who holds the record, there will be somebody who will try to break it. It's only a matter of time. Why are we so obsessed with world records? From Amelia Earhart circumnavigating the globe, to the first astronauts to land on the moon, to those people who ride off of Niagara Falls inside of barrels, the desire to be the first, the biggest, the best at something spans the history of human civilization. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the first ever Olympic champion was actually a cook by the name of Coroebus, who hailed from the city-state of Elis in ancient Greece. Coroebus of Elis's record was for winning a foot race in the year 776 BC, earning him a place of honor for the rest of history. There is a reason why, even today, in the year 2021, we still know the name of this 3,000-year-old ancient Greek cook. It's because records aren't just a list of names and numbers, random facts to be memorized and regurgitated on game shows or at Wednesday night barroom trivia contests. Records are mirrors that reflect the period in history in which they were set, the good and the bad. They are monuments to humanity's greatest successes and reminders of our worst failings. Records aren't just things we do. Records are us.